with the We're Fruit Growers because what's really near and dear to us is saving water, using on-site water so that people can build healthy soil and grow food, because we think growing food is really important, and we're also really interested in climate change. So hence I came up with this title, Using Rainwater, Greywater, and also Living Roofs to Save Water, Grow Food, and Sequester Carbon. And carbon sequestration is something that I've been interested in for many years, and it was one of the incentives along with stormwater management that got me into initially doing this work with living roofs and rainwater initially, and then Greywater. But I'm becoming more interested in it currently, and want to talk more about that towards the end. So I'm hoping to not spend too long on the slides. I didn't figure out exactly how long they are, but I'm hoping to get into an interesting conversation. Again, we're a for-profit company doing design build systems for rainwater and greywater, and also some living roofs. But we also do education, we do grant writing, and now I'm involved in a nonprofit to do carbon sequestration. So please jump in. I can't see your faces, but if anybody has any questions, just feel free to jump in. Anything so far? I heard dogs.
Looking at the, I can't remember what it was, I'm picture that you showed about that. Renovations are going to do at Union Bend. It looks like it's a lot, right?
Are you talking to me? I can't tell.
What we're going to do, expand the house and they want to do in the backyard. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Are you in Zoom yet?
Yeah.
Other people talking. All right. Okay, so
Is it no video, right?
this first slide is
That's,
a slide I made
you
a long
stopped your video.
Okay.
So you gotta.
Remember, everybody mute themselves.
Yes, please, thank you. About stormwater mitigation. So living in San Diego, it's very dramatic because we have, you guys see my arrow here? When it rains, we have debris build up on our streets by our storm drains, and a lot of that grease and debris goes into the storm drain. And then in much of San Diego, the storm drains feed into our open space canyons, which unfortunately are really not enough to manage all that stormwater. So what happens is that we have our beaches contaminated, which is really unfortunate, especially because people still don't have enough water to grow their food and their shrubs because they're directing the runoff off their property instead of keeping it on their property. So this slide, again, this is probably all stuff you guys are all pretty familiar with, but when we work with rainwater and greywater and trying to sequester carbon, we try to go back to a more natural way of water runoff, where you can see these little tiny arrows. So the water is getting intercepted by the plant material, and then it's being captured by the soil and the leaves and so forth, and then small amounts run into small waterways, and then you see these smaller arrows and eventually make it into the larger waterways. Whereas in developed areas, we have way too much runoff, and then, but then we also have trouble growing whatever we want to grow because we're allowing the water to run off. So when we look at water conservation and management, a bunch of different things, you know, a really obvious one is rainwater tanks. Other stuff is that really is our first place that we go is passive rainwater harvesting with things like rain gardens and up to infiltration chambers. We also recycle gray water for irrigation. Sometimes use rainwater for non-potable indoor use, especially in the winter when people, or if they're collecting rainwater, they may have full tanks and another storm coming, but nothing that needs to be irrigated, and they can use the rainwater to flush their toilets or to do their cold water line on their laundry. As we build water in the soil, that lowers the irrigation needs over time, as I'm sure everybody in this group probably knows. And then living roofs is another strategy. So this is a figure I made a long time ago, just to kind of illustrate a different way of approaching a residential lot. So normally you would have the roof runoff and the surface runoff all going to the street, but here with strategic grading, the sidewalks and walkways and driveways are raised, so the water goes back onto the property. The roof water is directed into the landscape. Some of the roofs are planted, which means you see much smaller arrows off the planted roofs because the water is infiltrating and not running off as quickly. There may be a cistern. And when we do a living roof, we typically have a reservoir, a rainwater tank, which also collects city water runoff when there's no rain, and then recirculates it so that that water can be reused. So this is just an example of a simple project, but one that I really like, that I try in general, everything we do is as holistic and integrated as we can do. And again, usually the goal is first to grow food, but just in general that we know we need to grow plants in urban areas because we need the evapotranspiration, we need the air purification, we need the birds and the insects, we need all those things. But anyway, so this is an example of a combined rainwater greywater system. There's an outdoor shower. The shower drains into a greywater tank with a small pump, of course filter for hair at the inlet. There's a pump controller here. And then we have a couple of rainwater tanks, which you'll see again in a moment with passion flower growing all around them. And we have just a gravity drain, but we also have another valve that that can be controlled by an irrigation controller you can't see here, but anyway, so you can drain rainwater into the greywater tank and then use rainwater as well as greywater to irrigate. In this case, there's several citrus trees, and then there's also, I don't remember what the perimeter shrub was. There's a perimeter shrub as well. So it's just a pretty simple integrated system. And after a few months, the two tanks are pretty hard to see because they have passiflora growing around them. Any questions so far?
Is there a problem with phosphates in the laundry runoff that would attack plants or cause problems?
Yes, yes. This system is just the outdoor shower, but when we have laundry, we do have to tell people to be careful of what products they use, and there'll be a slide about that a bit further down, but basically the things to avoid are boron, phosphates, and sodium are the kind of no-nos. And so there's certain detergents that we recommend, and there's ways to get around that, but you do have to be cautious. It kind of depends on the situation though. We'll get into different greywater systems, but when we do greywater systems where the greywater is going into mulch basins and it's not too close to the tree roots, the mulch will filter the what's in that greywater, and so you can get away with a little bit more than you might otherwise. And that's the kind of system we have here. So there's just little half-inch ports, and they're in between the fruit trees. There'll be a picture of that later, but good question. So I'm going to come back to rainwater and greywater and then end up talking about kind of where I want to go with the carbon sequestration, and really want some input from you guys about that too. But just briefly, I want to talk about living roofs. So this is just a figure showing the composition of a green roof, not exactly how we do it, but basically a green roof is a way to get vegetation in urban areas wherever you can, which could be the park strip, but it could be the roof if there's no other place. And basically you have on top of your roof deck, plywood roof deck, you then have a membrane and then waterproof membrane, and then typically if the membrane is not protective against organic material and roots, you have a root barrier. You may or may not need insulation, and then we have some kind of a drainage system, usually these little cup systems which store a little bit of water in between storms, and also a protection with a protection course. And then you have your growth medium and your plants on top of that. That's the basic concept. And
Yeah, I got a question. What's the weight per square foot on that roof?
that one, who knows? That one looks pretty big, but what we typically do, it's about 30 pounds per square foot, and that's for 6 inches of growing material, which is still kind of a lot, but that's can be fairly easily doable, between like 20 and 30 pounds per square foot.
I was trying to compare it to a snow load back east.
Yeah. So benefits, I mean, the reason I started doing this was for stormwater management, but also basically, it's all kind of about climate change for me. How can you try to recapitulate more natural ecosystems in cities? But it also keeps the roof protected much longer, helps with air quality. The building stays cooler and warmer, both. It's insulated. And then, you can grow food on the roof potentially, attract birds and insects and so forth. And there's examples of this in places like Chicago, where they have many blocks of green roofs, and they're measurably cooler. So you can decrease the urban heat island effect without, you have in areas where there's a lot of black roofs and not a lot of plants. We haven't done that many of these recently, just because they tend to be expensive. And they do need to be irrigated, so we always like to use rainwater. But this is one we did up in Beverly Hills. Kind of a fun one. This is what it looked like when it was done. This I just threw in. This is a couple slides that Brooke, my partner, put together, and some nice data that and we're trying to look at metrics also for carbon. But if residents reduce their landscape irrigation by 50%, that would make a big difference in the amount of water that's imported, because about half the water people typically use in San Diego is for outdoor irrigation. So if you go from turf to more drought tolerant, and you can see this has also been regraded to hold some of the water, less water is needed. And on a bigger scale, we have water treatment plants treating many gallons of water a day. But if we have individual households putting in laundry gray water systems, that cuts way back on the amount of water that's treated. So even with water treatment, having residential gray water systems, we think still makes sense. Gray water basically is wash water, meaning water that is from your shower, your bath, lavatory sinks, and laundry. So basically everything but the toilet and the kitchen sink provides phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, and again, you don't want too much of these, but some is good. And basically these are on-site wastewater treatment systems using subsurface irrigation. This is the figure just showing the basic concept. Is that a question? No, okay. So again, so it's bath, shower, lav sinks, laundry. By code, you have to have a diverter valve so you can direct the gray water to the sewer or septic when it's raining hard, or if people are using the wrong products. It may go straight into the landscape by gravity, or it may go into a surge tank with a pump and then be distributed in the yard. So benefits here: saving water, conserving water and energy. This is the on-site wastewater treatment, converting potential pollutants into nutrients, reducing strain on treatment or septic systems, which this is really dramatic for people that have a septic system, especially when they divert their laundry into the landscape. Laundry water is what is considered very high strength gray water because the lint really builds up. So that makes a big difference in terms of the maintenance on the septic tank. And it also is going to enhance the water quality and conserve ecosystems and grow plants. So like I said earlier, people use typically about 50% of their total water outdoors. And so for many people, a lot of water can be diverted. 4,000 gallons a month is extreme. Not many families use 1,000 gallons of gray water a month, thank goodness, but a family of 4 very often uses, 500 or 600 gallons a month that can be then used in the landscape, which is substantial. That can be enough to irrigate quite a lot of fruit trees, for example, or landscape. So what we found are plant considerations. We've been doing a lot of creating spreadsheets as we try different plants, but we, in general, fruit trees, all kinds of fruit trees work really well. We used to think avocados didn't, but we're finding actually avocados, in spite of their salt sensitivity, if you are cautious with them, they can handle gray water. And many of the typical landscape plants that we use in Southern California also work, unless they are pH sensitive or very low water use. So there's a lot of variety that can be grown with gray water. Simple systems, laundry to landscape, we put in a brass 3-way valve. It's something that we do workshops, people can learn how to do themselves. It's not complicated. Or we do whole house systems. So at the laundry to landscape, we release the water through these little 1/2-inch ports that you can then balance your zones. And we're now using the same kind of system even with pump systems, because then we don't have to treat the water as much, which is really helpful. So here's, basically how you would be laying out your your trees and then running your lines to irrigate them. So in a whole house gray water system, the gray water is diverted into a surge tank. This is a fairly small one. This is the 3-way valve is under this cover right here. And it can be pretty well blended in to the garden, so it's not too obvious. The lid is usually, most of the ones we do are 24 to 30 inches diameter lid, but the lid is typically installed like 1 inch or 2 above grade. Here's an example of, this is kind of a fun one that was, I don't have another picture, but this was actually installed in a walkway. So there's like kind of a fake flagstone over it that's lighter. So it's just blended in, people walk over it. This is a detail that I made just to convey the basic system. So Greywater takes the lines from laundry, bath, showers, lavatory, sinks, and whereas the toilets and the kitchen sink go into a separate line directly to sewer or septic. Combined Greywater line may often exit the building if this is new construction, go into a diverter valve, and one leg will go to the surge tank, the other leg will go to sewer and be connected to the overflow, and both are protected by a backflow device so you don't get black water into your surge tank that you're using to irrigate. And then typically we have a pump in here and a coarse filter for hair and lint. And then the pump is going to pump out into the landscape with a variety of different types of irrigation. Basic concept. Questions? Probably going too fast. It's hard to talk without being able to see people. And this is what the landscape looks like from that little tank that I showed you a minute ago, sorry. This is the same project here. The Greywater line goes all around the backyard and irrigates many different fruit trees. And this one is using a Greywater dripper line.
And what is the size of that tank, that submerged tank in that last picture?
Those two are about 50 gallons.
So it's actually quite small. That's not a very big tank at all.
Well, no, it's not. And the reason is that by code, you can't store gray water unless it's extensively treated. And so it's literally what we call a surge tank. And the pump basically pumps out whenever someone takes a shower or does laundry. When it fills to a certain level, the pump will pump it down. And it violates everything probably everybody in this group thinks about how you should water fruit trees because they get watered when someone takes a shower. So they're not on a timer. But what I find is that, you know, after many years of doing this, especially if you don't dump the water right on the tree roots, that just like any living being, trees will adjust to what regimen you give them as long as it's consistent, is what we've found. We do sometimes on the bigger projects have a system where we use a bigger tank that allows, we have a series of float switches so that the pump doesn't just come on with a minimum liquid level. It doesn't come on until the tank fills up to whatever dose we want to give each zone. And then we use a hydraulic indexing valve so that we can deliver, let's say 100 gallons, you know, to the orchard, and then 100 gallons to the shrubs, and then it goes back to the orchard, or, you know, something like that. So we do that in some cases, but not always. That's a bit more expensive system. And here's another example of a different kind of approach. This is this search tank is a similar size. It's 24 inches in diameter, 3 feet deep. So it fills to about, I think about 80 gallons. And there's a pump in here and a filter at the inlet, which you can actually see. You can see the diverter valve. From here, it would go to sewer splice box. And this is a sand filter. So the water gets pumped out, goes through the sand filter. There's also a backwash that the sand filter can be backwashed. And then it goes to actual irrigation valves, although they're dirty water valves. And this system actually irrigates a really cool orchard. I don't have a great picture, but it's a lot of cherimoya and a bunch of different agave. We just put this in recently, not the orchard. The orchard was already there, but anyway. So very different kind of system.
Can I ask a question about the comment you made about not being able to store? So
Yes.
if suppose we have a tank already and we'd like to use it for irrigating plants, but there are times when we want to be away from home for a week or two or a month.
Sure. Yeah.
So we were really hoping that we would be able to use the rainwater to fill the tank, and then
we do that. Yeah, you can.
So
but you can't fill it. You can't fill it. You can. Sorry, I'm reacting too quickly. So what you can do, what we do is once we set up the irrigation for a Greywater system, rather than having a separate irrigation system while the plants are getting established or when the family goes on vacation, we plumb an irrigation valve to that tank and have that on the clock, you know. So like typically we maybe have city water or rainwater. If we can use rainwater, we'll pump rainwater into it once a week and flush the lines. And then when the family goes on vacation, they just up that schedule so that now they get, you know, irrigation to, like, for example, this orchard has a system for makeup water. So if they go on vacation for even a month or something, you can just program that same system to pump the water out. It won't be stored, it will just be delivered to the tank and then pumped out.
okay, I'm not quite following what you meant then about how you're not allowed to store Greywater.
You can't store it, so you would deliver it enough to the tank to then get pumped out. So again, whenever that tank fills, whether it's with a simple float switch that will turn the pump on with only 20 gallons or a system of float switches that won't turn it on until there's, say, 100 gallons. Excuse me, if I close this door. Sorry. Freya, come on. Freya. Sorry about that. My dog just came in from my husband's in another meeting. So you can't store the water in the tank, but you can have water delivered to the tank, you know, this many minutes of water delivered to the tank, and then the pump will come on and pump it out. Does that make sense?
Okay, so in other words, we also have to have a city water feeding the same tank. The tank cannot be exclusively fed by Greywater.
If you are going to need extra water for when you are on vacation, or to flush it. So like in that example that I showed, go back to way back, beginning. So like in this system here, there's these two rain tanks, and then there's the Greywater, little Greywater tank and pump. There's actually an automated valve that's in this, that's actually under one of these boxes that can be programmed to open, and then we'll let the rainwater tanks drain for like 10 minutes into the tank, and then the pump will pump it out. And we've done that with 5,000 gallon rainwater tanks too. So that way, you can use a single pump to deliver the water to the landscape, but you can have more than one source going to that tank. It could be Greywater and rainwater, it could be Greywater and city water, it could be a combination.
Okay, and it's fine to store rainwater. You just can't store Greywater.
Exactly. You can store rainwater as long as you want, which is why we often have that scenario of you have like, you know, maybe a 5,000 gallon rainwater tank, and maybe you have a pressurized hose bib for the rainwater tank, or a dripper line for the rain. Oh, I'm going too fast. Or, you know, a variety of different things. But you can store the rainwater for years if you want to, because it's screened against. We'll get to rainwater in a minute, but it's going to be screened against mosquitoes, and it's going to be, you know, it's in a tank that is protected against UV, so you don't get algal growth, and there's sediment filters going into the tank, so the water inside the tank stays clean. It doesn't need to be, tank doesn't need to be clean. You can store it for years if you needed to.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Additional question.
Yes.
Is it an ordinance, like a city or county or state ordinance, that the Greywater cannot be stored in a,
Yes.
Tank?
Yeah, it's in the code, in the California Plumbing Code. And you can store it if it's treated, but the treatment is very expensive. So and right now there's only one treatment system that meets the standard, which is called NSF 350. You basically have to treat the water to the point where nothing's going to grow in it, and then you can store it. And so actually we put in the very first system of this kind in the county. And it's been a total headache because the technology just isn't really there yet for residential scale. So we've had a lot of difficulty trying to get it to work well. But on that system, we have a bioreactor tank that has filtration down to 0.02 micron, and also an aerobic bacterial culture like you would have in a septic tank, and a blower to keep it aerated. So then the water gets drawn from that through the membranes into a clear water tank where it can be stored. Although it gets pumped out to irrigation and to flush toilets, but under those conditions it can be stored, and it can be also used for above grade irrigation, which you can't do with untreated Greywater. Has to be released subsurface. So the technology is developing, but it's not really there yet, and it's very expensive, and it kind of defeats the purpose of on-site wastewater treatment, because with all of that treatment, you end up dumping stuff into the sewer. But anyway.
Now the county has a big storage facility up in Miramar there, where the purple piping and everything goes out for doing landscape watering and all. Is that got that same system that you're talking about now?
No, that's a different standard, because that's recycled water, and I don't know exactly how that's treated, but when it's recycled, it's to a certain standard also that, you know, that's based on Title 22. And when it's recycled to a certain standard, that can be stored, but that can't be used on a individual residential project like the one I'm talking about, or used for toilet flushing. So it's a little different standard. I'm not totally familiar with what's involved in the recycled water, but it's not the same. I can tell you that. Yeah. So Greywater is very useful because of, you know, mainly to save water, but also a way to reclaim otherwise wasted nutrients, and a way to grow food. So this is a figure that I'm kind of in the middle of working on, but it illustrates some of the points I've been trying to make. And this is just basically showing some of the different options, and these are things we've been working on. So the top here is what's involved in all greywater systems. So all greywater systems have to have a diverter valve or a three-way valve where greywater is coming in a common port, and then it can be either switched to sewer septic or to the garden. That's always required. And then you could, from there, if you have a gravity system, it can be directed right into the garden with what's called a branch drain kind of a system, or it can be, we do these gravity distribution boxes, which can work really well if you have a project where you have fruit trees or something like that that you want to irrigate that are downhill. You can, especially if they're downhill, you can run like 1-inch lines even to different trees or into a swale, and it's all by gravity. And you can plumb makeup water to this too, which is one of the, again, I'm like really into my makeup water. So you could plumb rainwater or city water to the same box to get extra water to those trees. So this is all gravity. And then pumped, you know, same principles. You have your diverter valve, you're going to the garden, but before you get there, this line would then go into this tank where there's a pump, a filter at the inlet, and then this is like kind of a range of different options. So the simplest is this flood irrigation with 1/2-inch valves in where the mulch is basically the filter. Then the next level that we do quite a bit is we use a dripper line, a NetFM product that is a little different than regular NetFM. It has a higher flow rate, 2.2 gallons per hour is what we use every 12 inches. The ports have 400 micron filters built in, so there's some filtration even at the dripper line. And then we also use a disc filter, 250 micron disc filter in between the pump and that dripper line. And then more complicated is that sand filter that I showed you. That allows you to use regular irrigation valves. And then finally, the most complicated is this NSF. It's actually 350, not 250, which I'm not crazy about because it's ridiculously expensive. You're going to spend 20 or 30 grand, and it's not that easy to maintain. I think in the future it'll get better, but that's kind of the range that we can offer right now, from gravity to quite complex. But this is kind of our preference, is if we can do a gravity system, either just directly or with a distribution box, or basically a pumped flood irrigation system, because then very little maintenance. Maintenance is mainly just checking that your different areas are balanced and maintaining mulch. And then back to, I think it was John's question earlier. Actually, I don't say phosphates on here, but those are good too. You can have them in small amounts, but in particular, sodium and borax are big no-nos, and bleach. And phosphates and nitrates are beneficial in small amounts, but not something you want a lot of. Oasis is our best bet. It's a really great one that's actually designed for use in the landscape, but there's other options, Ecos, and I've never used the soap nuts, but this is supposed to be good too. Okay, so then I'm going to talk about rainwater next. Any other questions about greywater before I move on? Okay, so probably most people have heard this, but basically the simple math is that when people say it doesn't rain in San Diego, with 10 inches in a typical 2,000 square foot roof area, you're going to get 12,000 gallons a year. Even 1,000 square foot roof area, 600 gallons per inch, or about 6,000 gallons a year. So that's actually pretty substantial. Basic components. The roof is usually the catchment area. You can collect from the surface runoff, but it's dirtier. You have to filter it more. It's better just to direct that into the landscape. You have your gutters and your downspout. You have your tank, which usually has some kind of filtration. Overflow, we like to have the overflow go into a rain garden or landscaped area. And then you may have a pump and a hose bib or what have you. There's many different kinds of tanks, lots of different cool options. This is kind of our go-to is, you know, the biggest round green tank. It doesn't have to be green, but that's usually the color. Round plastic tank, biggest bang for your buck, and you can hide it amongst the trees someplace. These timber tanks are kind of cute. We've done these before. And then the corrugated steel tanks are a lot more expensive, but they're pretty cool. They have a liner inside. This is one we installed up in Rancho Palisades up in LA. This is actually a 5,000 gallon tank. The liner gives you some options. You can make it a potable grade liner or a non-potable, like whatever you want. And then we do a lot of these slimline tanks because they fit if you have like an area of your house where you keep your trash cans. It's kind of more of a utility area. You can fit these tanks in. They're only 25 inches deep. They hold 530 gallons. So they can fit in a lot of spaces, often more than one. And then this is a little hard to see, but we do some modular tanks. This one is 310 gallons. And we often find situation under a deck, or this was along a retaining wall. And this one has 14 of these tanks. So quite a few all connected. Is a pretty cool option. And there's a whole series of fruit trees downhill from here.
The timber tanks look really pretty. Are those expensive compared to the polyurethane regular ones?
They are, but you know, I mean, it's not. They're not crazy expensive though. This one here is about 500 gallons, and the owner is perfectly happy to have people come by and look at it. And it's right in his front yard. It's in Lucadia, so I mean, if you're interested.
Is there a layer on the inside of that is basically just like that green polyurethane?
Yeah. No, it's metal.
Oh, it's metal. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then below ground tanks, these are like the fanciest. These are Xerxes fiberglass tanks. This is a client of ours that we did a Greywater system for, but we did not install these tanks. I've never installed them. They're quite complex to install. I'm open to it, but I haven't. This is kind of a cool little tank that can be above or below grade that we've installed. They only hold about 400 gallons, but you could put several in a row. Actually, I have a couple of these in the ground at my house. And then this is a modular underground tank that we've done quite a bit of because basically these boxes just hold the shape of the tank. And then they're wrapped in a geotextile fabric to protect the waterproof liner. And then there's actually geotextile first to protect the tank from the dirt and rocks, and then a layer of the membrane, and then another layer of the geotextile to protect the membrane from the tanks. And then that's all sealed up, and there's an external pump vault. It's pretty cool because we've made long, narrow ones. We've made different, you can fit different shapes and sizes with those. You can make them L-shaped, all kinds of things. These are pretty basic underground tanks. I love this picture because these tanks were delivered out in front of this house, and we actually took them on end through the living room because that was the only way we could get them to the backyard. And they had like a big sliding door. That was kind of fun. Now they're underground and connected. So rainwater also saves water, but the quality of the water is very different than gray water. It's great for many kinds of plants, more acid sensitive plants like blueberries that like to be neutral or below. Rainwater is fantastic, naturally soft. And using rainwater is really beneficial for flood control and protecting our beaches. So I didn't put any other pictures in of rainwater systems. I'm not sure why, but anyway. So I'm kind of jumping ahead now to my last topic, which is something that we're not working on formally in our company. I mean, we've been, I think from the very beginning, carbon sequestration was one of the things I was thinking about when I first started doing green roofs, although many of the ground covers and so forth that we use on the green roof don't really sequester much carbon. But in thinking about trying to address climate change on a bigger scale than just our day-to-day work, the pandemic has inspired me. I feel like more people are thinking about what's happening in their backyard, and they're maybe more open to thinking about climate change. And so I've begun trying to figure out strategies to like what's something that we can do, and what can we teach people how to do. And my idea is carbon sequestration, that if we can find some simple metrics and some simple strategies, not just for regenerative agriculture, but for backyard carbon gardening, and then get some good infographics and some good blogs and get the word out there, that hopefully we can make some change and maybe get some grants and stuff like that. So I want to say a little bit more about that, and then I really want to get some feedback from this group, because I feel like this could be a good group that might be open to hearing about this and maybe giving us feedback on our blog posts, and it would be really great. But anyway, so carbon sequestration, if you're not, just define it a little bit. And part of the thing, our challenge is going to be coming up with language that maybe is more appealing, but I love the word sequester because it really means what we want, which is that, as people know, I think all plants, when they carry out photosynthesis, pull carbon from the atmosphere to make sugars and oxygen, but the trick is keeping the carbon in the soil, and carbon is the biggest storage of the soil is the biggest carbon storage on the planet. But unfortunately, most of our soil is losing carbon because of excess tillage and use of synthetic pesticides and many practices like that. But anyway, so the idea of sequestering carbon means that you keep it in the soil away from, so it doesn't go back into the atmosphere. And in order for that to happen, you need healthy soil. So here's kind of a cool figure just showing that carbon is stored in the trunk and branches, but the biggest amount really is in the soil. And that's something I think a lot of people don't really realize. And the way to keep the carbon in the soil is things like reducing tillage, using ground covers and mulches, growing more perennials as opposed to so many annuals, growing longer grass, and of course planting trees, because the wood of the tree is one of the biggest carbon sources. So, I'm thinking about this, again, like the big things to think about are, avoiding tillage, using cover crops, mulch and compost, planting trees. Clearly, we need to think about, we need water to do carbon gardening. And then one of the things that I want to work on is figuring out, like, how much carbon can 1 yard sequester? Like, if you have a residential lot and you have 3 fruit trees, how much carbon do those trees sequester? Maybe somebody in this group knows the answer to that. Yeah, one more slide and then I'm going to open it up for conversation. So yeah, here's some resources. Again, our websites are Catching H₂O.com, but then also H₂OMe.com, which was originally my partner Brooke's website, but now is another portal to Catching H₂O. We have 2 different names for our company legally, but there's other good resources as well. And we work with SD Sustainable as well for some of the courses that we teach. And this is my email address, and here's some books. And that is that. So how do I go back to stop share here? Okay, I'm back. So now I can see your faces again. So I'd love to hear questions and also thoughts if people are interested in carbon gardening and would be open to me posting on the Rare Fruits page when we have questions about polling about language for carbon gardening.
You did a presentation, I believe it was, what, 3 or 4 years ago, I think, to our group.
That was my partner, Brooke. Yeah, my partner Brooke did,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I believe that a little bit earlier than that, there used to be ordinances against being able to utilize gray water for plant use in the community. It seemed to me like there was ordinances, but that has been somewhat rescinded and relaxed.
Yes, so actually, as of 2009, I think it was allowed before that too, but most recently in 2009 was when it became legal again. And actually our company personally pulled many of the first permits when it did become legal. And all the counties were like, we've never seen this before, but we just followed the code and applied and got permits. So yeah, for a long time, I think it was legal some years before that, and then it was illegal for a while, and then it became legal again because it was understood that people needed water. They needed to irrigate. So yeah, so it's been legal since 2009 in California. Other input? Other questions?
I think you covered everything. I know I checked on your website and it has an awful lot of information too.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of pictures of projects on there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Rosalind, how close, we have 2 banana trees in the back. And can we use the laundry water? We don't have the system. I can just collect it with the bucket. Then
Sure.
How close of the trunk of the banana tree I can water them?
I would say, I wouldn't mean at least a foot away. I mean, probably better off a couple feet away.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if we lack of water because it's been there. I have 2 and they've been there probably 5 years as not having a single banana.
Oh, well, bananas love gray water. So if you start giving them gray water, you'll probably get some bananas.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
But that's interesting though. You can't use your gray water on the surface. It's supposed to be underground. You're supposed to.
Well, you're not supposed to pour it on the surface. No, I mean, that's kind of cheating with the bucket. But I would say if you were going to do that, you'd want to like dig a basin and then pour it into the basin so that it's going to soak in.
But the mulch, will that take care of that problem?
Yes, it will. Yeah.
And you're okay.
Yeah.
The mulch actually acts as a filter for a lot of that.
Yeah.
Are those systems really difficult to set up on an established house in the city?
It depends on whether the house is built on slab. If the house is built on slab, then you only have access to upstairs showers, and even that can be tricky depending on the location of them. But most of the time, the laundry at least is accessible. Although people mostly have front loaders, which don't produce, they don't use very much water per load. So families that do a lot of laundry, even if they have a very efficient machine, can still produce quite a bit. But so it's variable. But where we've had good luck is, some of the homes in neighborhoods like Kensington, and Mission Hills, where people have older homes that have crawl spaces and then yards that go downhill, then you could very simply put in a diverter valve on the existing plumbing and then a pipe out to the garden, and often do a totally gravity system.
I'd be really interested in it, mainly for showers.
Showers is the best, if you can use showers, because that's the biggest water payoff.
Yeah, showers in I have 2 young boys that love the water, so baths and showers would be the best, and they're both upstairs, and that is a slab system.
Oh, okay, but if it's upstairs, that makes it more accessible. Yeah, well, reach out to us. We'd love to.
I took your information and I will definitely do that. My name is Corey, by the way.
Yeah, great. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Rosalind.
You're welcome. Yeah. Other questions about Greywater or Rainwater? Oh, and I want to mention too that we do workshops too. So one approach, if someone's interested in possibly having a system put in, it can be done as a workshop, and then you have volunteers come and work in your yard. Even with COVID, we're super careful. Probably not right now, not during the spike, but you know, a bit later. And we also, my partner Brooke does hands-on classes as well. You know, so even though we are contractors and do installations, we also offer we offer courses, we offer workshops, we offer a variety of different approaches. So you can learn how to do it yourself and put in your own system, especially the simpler ones.
There's a company on Federal Boulevard in East County, Drums and Totes,
Yes,
that
yes.
handles a lot of the storage facilities that people around can utilize, and they do handle a lot of different sizes
Yes.
of facilities.
Yeah, that's a good place. You have to be a little bit careful because some of the tanks they have are not UV protected. And so if you get, I forget what those are called, but there's some of the tanks they have there that are white plastic that are not meant to be outside. So if you get one of those, you just have to paint it. But they do.
That plastic will disintegrate in the sunlight.
Exactly. Yeah, but no, that's a great resource. Yeah, and they even have some of the larger tanks sometimes. Mostly they have smaller ones, but they do have some of the larger ones. So yeah, that's a great resource. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. And there's also a place to get larger tanks is the Tank Source in Alpine. They have up to 5,000 gallon tanks out there.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's also a company where we get those modular tanks. I like local. There's a company called Ronco Plastics in Tustin that they do a lot of marine tanks, and you can get the smaller tanks from them, and those are pretty cool. We often put them in crawl spaces or under decks and places. People think they have no place to store rainwater, and then you look and you go, well, what about under here? Like you can find a little nook and cranny. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, now, Rosalind, are those more like the 500 to 1,000 gallon capacity tanks?
The modular ones? Yeah.
From Tustin.
Oh, from Tustin. Yeah, no, the Tustin ones are small. Yeah, those are small. I think the biggest ones, I think that 310 gallon one might be the biggest, but I've used that one a lot, but those can be great to fit underneath something. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I think that's about it, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, Rosalind, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So one last question before I say goodbye. I didn't get any response really about the carbon gardening. I did join your Facebook group. When we have posts, if we are trying to get blogs to get a response on that, can we post those? Can we share those with you? Are you guys interested?
Yeah. So, Jerry runs the Facebook for us. I don't know if you need to do anything special or not, but I think just put it on there.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Rosalind.
Thank
you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
very much.
Thanks for showing up. It's a great program.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. This was
Bye.
excellent.
We'll see you, I don't know, maybe in January, hopefully.
Hey, John.